the vase in a newspaper, the Boston Globe, about 12 years ago. And it told us this wonderful story about this Greek vase, 25 centuries old, that had been broken and pieced together. But I really fell in love with the vase. It was beautiful. It was 2 feet high and 2 feet across with handles. And I guess you would call it today's graphic novel or comic strips. It had 7 tiers, and the tiers kind of wind around the vase with these figures, 200 figures, black figures on it, very lively. So I really was, I couldn't get this vase out of my head. So I kept researching and researching, somewhat like my novel about Celia Thaxter. She was a New Hampshire poet. And this vase, actually, she kept pestering me and hounding me. She said, go to the Harvard Library and find something out about me. So I went and I discovered Francois, who originally discovered the vase, Alessandro Francois, had written an article in an 1844 journal, and I discovered that journal at the Harvard Library. This was quite a coup because an art dictionary that I had read had said Francois hadn't written anything about the vase. And then she said, okay, now go to the Boston Library, the Mugar Library, and I found Mauro Cristofani, and this book also was in Italian, and I found his whole book in Italian on this vase. He had devoted much of his life to the vase, and I had the librarian photocopy all of the details of these many, many figures that were on the vase. As a young poet, I usually put my work out, this was before the days of the computer, so that I could see the visual progress of the manuscript. And even after the computer, I still had to put my manuscripts out. It's a visual thing. And so when I was writing the Tales of the Francois vase, I had all of this research material, and I laid it out in my 10 by 10 studio all over the floor so that I could see the details of the vase and where it was taking me. So this is what I do. I center myself among the pictures, and I always, with the Tales of the Francois vase, I saw Hermes, who is the messenger god to Hades, but he is a messenger god, and he has the caduceus, and he's kind of like the protector of the vase, I think of him as. Of course, there are the Trojan War horses on one side, and on the other side you have this procession of the gods. I wanted to explain about that there are 200 labels with these figures, and Ergodamus made me, Clytius painted me, is here, a label backwards. Ergodamus and Clytius were the first ones to do the division of labor in the Athens Ceramicus, potter's quarter, from which we get our word ceramics. And also, there are signatures, so it's like a signed book, the signed Iliad. These labels also appear in my book as well. So there's a book on the vase, and the vase is a book. So I was standing in the middle of this circle with all this research, like my poem says, and all of a sudden I heard this voice. I see you circle round, then return, as if to spin the world you found in an urn.
The voice and its music were inside the circle.
She introduced me to the commander of Athens and his wife. Now, this was a wedding bowl made for them at the commander's palace. and it was like a crater, one of our punch bowls, and they had it as a wedding gift, and therefore you have this wedding procession on one side of the gods, and so the vase probably stayed with them until they started quarreling, and the marriage was old, and then they put it in a ship, and the commander of Athens probably sold it because the trade between Etruria and Greece and vases was great because the Etruscans were not great potters, and they revered the Greek vases, and he would have fetched a handsome sum. So it landed on the shores of what is now Italy, the Etruscan hill town of Clusium, now called Chiusi, outside of Florence. This also happened to be the capital. So the vase introduced me to the king of the capital, Lars Porsena, and also introduced me to a few Etruscans. They're very lively people. They had a big banquet hall, but it also served for laying out the dead. So it was like a sort of a very merry wake. I met also an Etruscan Harriusbeck. She was a very mysterious woman.
At once, seeing the vase, I knew its magic.
Tinia.
Tinia, 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 Tinia. The god of thunderbolts called me from within.
They were very spiritual people, and the Harriusbecks, called Specere, from Specere or Specchio in Italian, was a seer, and she could tell the future of the departing dead soul. And so she did not read tea leaves like our fortune teller, but she read sheep's livers, and she would fill the bowl with sheep's livers to the brim, and she would divine the fortunes. There is an audio CD in the back, and the story of that, just by chance, I saw in the library a mention of a place called Radio Works in New York. So I sent the original production to them, and they said, yes, we'll take it. Now, and we want to have it as one of the best independently produced plays for our season. Well, they ran it 2 seasons. It was syndicated across the country to community radio, college radios, and NPR stations. So it really had that life before it became a book. Then another lover of the vase, someone who fell under her spell, was Sid Hall at Hobblebush Books. And he and Roger selected the tales, and he not only did he put the CD in the back of the book, but he also made sure the little vase details are dancing through the poem. And the backstory, which I translated from the Italian, he has included that. He went all out on it. So he's kind of not only the vase's hero, but mine as well. This is a real story of survival over a period of 25 centuries. The vase was broken 3 times and pieced together. Now, the 3rd time, I was in Italy at the time, and I was studying in Parma music, and then I went to Venice, and I was wading across the Piazza San Marco in Venice, and we were reading newspaper headlines that said the Arno was cresting its bank in Florence. And it did crest, and all of the river swept through Florence. If you can imagine Katrina, it swept through Florence, and all of these treasures in the Uffizi, it tore the doors off of the baptistry, and people, art conservators, came from all around. And the head conservator was Mauro Cristofani, who was the vase's second hero. And he came along, and the vase was on the 2nd floor, so it hadn't been touched, but he came along and he said, that has a missing piece. And I think I can put that in, and actually I must do an autopsy. He actually used the word autopsy on the vase. And so he x-rayed it, and he infrareded it, and he formed all kinds of tests on the glue. And then he picked up the vase and intentionally smashed it. Put all the pieces together, cleaned them off, and put it together, and at last the vase was whole, hermetically sealed in a glass case, temperature controlled. I am very drawn to the motif of separation and union. And in the Tales of the Francois vase, the vase is broken, and then it is put together very much like we are. We fall apart, and we put ourselves together, and we think we're whole and together, and yet there's some piece that is missing. And this is a very human quality. We keep trying to make it better, but we break apart. And the other book that I was thinking has the same sort of feeling of being together as Hermaphroditus in America. Now this also was a book-length poem, 160 pages. Now this is the idea of the man and the woman, the two in one, as the poetry of Rumi says. And although they separate and they go into the underbelly of America, if you will, the subway, they return and reunite at the end in a grand finale. So this book is very much like Tales of the Francois vase in that respect. I think I'll leave the vase with the last word, with her voice. Here at my center, so cool and soundless, none can enter but the light that is boundless. It falls inside as into a well and helps me decide what stories